All right, guys. So there was something that came up with the talk that I had with Cadell yesterday, where I was trying to explain the complexity of a a dating relationship. And Cadell made this mention of that there's this self, which we can, maybe call like the big other, right? Where the self that we realize, the more ego self, we can call it the small self, and that there's always a bigger self slash big other. I'm going to be using Lacanian terms here, so I'm afraid that it might be kind of alienating for those that may not know, but I'm going to try to simplify this so maybe people don't get too confused. The way I'm going to describe the big other uh, may not be acceptable for people that study Lacan, but just to try to make sense, I will try. Let's put it this way. I'll try to make sense of it a little bit later after I show you guys the diagram, and then I'll try my best to break it down. But I think first I should show the diagram, so maybe you can get a sort of an idea about how complex the dating relationship is, right? The relationship between you and another person already in a relationship. And actually you can use this as a model for even friendships. It doesn't have to be dating, but it can also be friendships, and how these dialectical exchanges are always occurring, and how quickly it changes, and how it's always changing. So I'm going to share my screen now and show you guys the diagram. Okay, so there is let me put this way. Okay, so I've called this the other slash self diagram. Okay, so this is the way I'm breaking down the relationship diagram, where your conception of yourself, which I will borrow Cadell's kind of terms, the small self is always being borrowed, or you could say symbolized from the big other, this big self. But then even your conception of the other, the small other, your partner, is also always being fed not only by the big other and the big self, but also by you. And then there's what I've tied in is, not only do you have a conception of your partner, of who you think she is, but there's also a conception of what you think we are. We as partners, we as friends. You could, I think you could even broaden this more and say a family. I'm a little bit hesitant to say society, but yeah, I mean, I guess the argument could be made there for that. So I just put the we in here. So what's going on is that the big other, the big self slash big self, is constantly feeding what you think of yourself. And not only is it constantly feeding what you think of yourself, but it's constantly thinking about what the partner thinks of themselves. But as you're being fed of what you think about yourself, your conception of yourself, at the same time, you're also conceiving of a conception about your partner, about who you think she is and what they're like. And then on top of that, you're also thinking about what we are like as a union, as a sort of unity. But again, these are also always being fed by the big other and the self, the big self. And in the next diagram, what I didn't stay consistent with my sizes here. So don't take the sizes too literally, okay? I just got lazy basically. So what I am showing in this sort of small self squared, small other squared, small self and other squared, and then there's the big other slash self times, times 3. I forget the word for it. But what I mean, multiplicity, okay, I won't get into it. But what I'm trying to express with the small self squared and the small other squared is that the big other slash self is constantly infinite, basically. Like the more knowledge you gain from yourself, there's always basically new knowledge to be gained, right? And as new knowledge of yourself is gained, you could say, well, let's use awareness, or yeah, self-awareness of yourself and how you behave and how you act. Not only does that change, but then you start perceiving your partner starts to change in correspondence with that. But not only does your partner start to change with that, but also your conception of us starts to change. Your conception of your entire relationship starts to change with it. Now, I think the danger that we do half the time is that we don't see that we're lumping two distinctions together at the same time. Meaning that when you talk to your partner, when you're thinking about your partner and the way your partner behaves, at the same time you are conceiving, you are not only battling your conception of what you think your partner is like, but you're also battling your conception of what you think your relationship is like and what it should be like. Uh, and I feel like this is going to get so complicated to try to explain this. So I'm going to really try to just break this down as simply as possible. Is that not only do you have expectations or of yourself and conceptions of who you think you are and how you should be, but you also have conceptions of your partner and how they should be like, or what you think they are like. And what I'm saying is that always changes, and it always changes along with what you think the relationship should be like and how the relationship actually is. If anything, this diagram should show you how complex and how significant these changes occur. Like any change in one arena creates a significant change in the other, right? Like even your partner, if your partner experience some kind of shift in who they think they are themselves, they begin maybe to start treating you differently, or maybe they call you out on a specific behavior that you've been displaying. And so when they call you out on a specific behavior that you've been displaying, that feedback starts enlightening you about yourself and how you behave. And so your conception of yourself starts changing. And then you actually view your partner differently, but then you view your relationship differently now. And it can be for good, or it can be for the better or for the worse. I mean, we all have seen how this goes when we decide to critique each other. But ultimately, this again always roots back into the sort of infinite resistance to be symbolized of the real, right? And the real is sort of just everything that has not yet been able to be symbolized through language. Through language. If you're not really familiar with Lacan, and I know that I using a lot of Lacan terms, but if I were just to if I were to kind of really break this down without getting people too confused with the other and the self, is that the self and the other are basically the same in this diagram. And the reason why is because when you discover something new about yourself, it was previously an other, right? Until it got brought into light. And this is why all of a sudden it's like it becomes an addition to your small self, right? It changes your conception of yourself. And simultaneously, it changes your conception of, and this is very all Hegelian here, right? Sort of the notion versus the object and trying to reach absolute knowledge. But only people that study Hegel kind of would know what I'm talking about here. But what I'm saying at the end of the day, I feel like I'm just repeating myself here, so forgive me. At the end of the day, I'm just trying to show you how complex this dynamic really is. And yeah, I keep thinking I have more to say on this, but I don't. So, and I think this diagram is important to look at and to reflect, because maybe you might start to see and have pay attention to how you conceive of your partner, how you conceive of the relationship, because oftentimes we conflate or we blur the lines between how we conceive of our partner and how we conceive of the relationship, the we. Because the moment you challenge the small other, you are challenging the we. I want to really stress that you're doing both at the same time. It's not that you are just saying that your partner has problems. It's that when you ask other people about you, when other people see your relationship, it's they have problems. And so when you realize that it's your partner, that you're having problems with your partner, it's not just your partner, it's we have problems. And when this gets challenged or changed, or the illusion gets shattered about who your partner really is, the relationship also breaks away from the illusion. But the funny thing about this is that when your illusion breaks away from your partner and the relationship, it also sheds light on how you are. And I think that is something that I really want to capitalize on, because it's not just a linear progression, like, oh, I perceive myself this way, and then I perceive my partner this way, and then I perceive us this way, or we this way. But the thing is, the moment that the relationship shatters, it goes back, it does a reversal, right? It feeds back into the system again. meaning that this self-reflective process is that the moment that the relationship shatters, that it changes, that what we thought the relationship was like isn't actually like this. And then I feel like most people stop at, they realize that the relationship doesn't work out, the illusion breaks, and then they blame it because it's the partner that fooled them, right? It's the partner that caused the disillusion. But actually, it's not just the partner that participates in the dissolution, but it's also you that participates in the dissolution itself. And it's very important to realize this, that any small shift is always a participation in this dialectical exchange. And I think that's really it. I meant for this to be a short presentation on how complex this is. Now it's not meant to be a perfect model, but it's really meant to show the complexity of relationships, of how we want to relate to each other. And this is always what I'm very adamant about how we relate to each other, because how we relate to each other is very tantamount to how I relate to myself, how I conceive of myself, how I conceive of the other. They're all contingent on these conceptions, because how I conceive of myself is contingent on how I conceive of the other, how I conceive of we, how I conceive of everything else. And once I change my conception of myself, the other changes, the we changes. But if the we is shattered, then the partner changes and myself changes. It is a complexity that needs to be reflected on, I think. It needs to be really, really grappled with, to understand that we cannot have sterile conceptions of each other. And I don't think we ever really do have sterile conceptions of each other, because this is really, in my opinion, experientially how it really happens. And actually, if I were to make it even more complex, I would say the event. I would say maybe the big other, in more, instead of making it so abstract, is that the big other / self is an event, right? An event. Something happens in your life. It's an event. And once that thing happens in your life, your conception of everything changes, right? We can talk about, maybe near-death life experiences. This always changes people's perception of everything, of society, of their partner, of themselves, of family. It completely shatters it. So we can call that an event, if people are still struggling to understand what I'm trying to say. But anyways, I think I got my point across, hopefully. Anyways, if you guys have any comments, any thoughts, I always like to hear them. Any critiques, feel free, go ahead. I love to hear them. So, all right, take care.